You ever have one of those days where you're just shaking with so much anger, your hands can barely hold the doorknob? That was me the morning the HOA president called the cops on my wife for refusing to join their precious community. I mean, you know how insane that sounds, right? My wife, Carol, just said no. No drama, no shouting, just a polite refusal. And next thing I know, there's the sheriff on our front porch, Margaret the HOA queen bee practically foaming at the mouth, shrieking for my wife to be arrested for corrupting the neighborhood. Yeah, that happened. Standing there, I felt this mix of sickness and rage, watching the woman I love treated like a criminal just for exercising her rights. And then, out of nowhere, the sheriff asks Margaret one simple question that absolutely nukes her whole argument. What legal authority does the HOA have here, ma'am? Watching Margaret stutter and squirm, I knew right then something wasn't right about this whole setup. But let me back up a sec, because the story gets so much crazier. We'd moved to Lakewood Estates for a fresh start, a quiet life by the lake, where our 12-year-old, Emma, could actually play outside. 3 bedrooms, a little dock, neighbors who waved. On the surface, it was that slice of American pie everyone talks about. What I didn't know, what nobody tells you in the glossy realtor brochure, is that my wife had more expertise in federal law enforcement than most consultants would ever admit. I had no clue. But that first Tuesday, when Margaret Thompson showed up with her clipboard and that "I own you" posture, things already felt off. You know the look: polo shirt with a logo, khakis starched to cardboard, clipboard clutched like it's a holy relic. She welcomes us, immediately starts rattling off our mortgage numbers, where our kid goes to school, even my client list. When I ask how she knows all this, she gives that tight smile. Oh, we do thorough research for safety. I'm thinking, who exactly is we? Meanwhile, Carol's snapping photos of every document Margaret shoves at us. Methodical, zero emotion. She shuts Margaret down with one line: "We're not interested in joining." Conversation's over. Margaret's face cycles through shock, confusion, panic, like people aren't supposed to say no in her universe. But Carol isn't finished. She asks for legal authority, formation docs, stuff I barely follow, but the way Margaret starts fumbling makes it obvious she's out of her depth. The papers she hands over look official. All seals and signatures, but Carol's eyes narrow. These are traced, not original. Watermarks are wrong. The formatting doesn't even match real HOA templates. I'm just standing there, thinking, when did my wife become a legal expert? A few days later, Margaret's back with a mandatory assessment. $1, $500 for emergency repairs to areas I've never seen. The paperwork is impressive if you don't know what you're looking for, but something about it feels too polished. I start using my old fraud investigation skills. Fonts don't match, language sounds legal but says nothing. The whole thing stinks of a scam, but the real pro at this is Carol. She's photographing everything, stone-faced, asking pointed questions about jurisdiction while giving nothing about herself. I swear, she's colder than most agents I used to know. That same week, our neighbor Deborah shows up with cookies, classic suburban grandma move. Sweet as pie, but asks oddly specific questions. When does Carol leave for work? What business am I running? Had we ever lived in government housing? I brush it off at first, but then she notices government license plates on Carol's sedan. The next thing you know, gossip about our non-compliance and Carol's supposed government ties is all over the community forum. Even strangers approaching Emma at the bus stop asking about our schedules. Carol stays calm through all of it, never rattled, always documenting. Meanwhile, I start to see patterns. Neighbors cornering Emma, forum posts about dangerous newcomers, and weird questions about our past. Then I find a trail camera hidden in the bushes, professionally installed, aimed right into our house. This wasn't some amateur trying to catch raccoons. Someone was surveilling us, tracking routines, and probably listening in. And the more I dig, the more it feels like the entire community is in on some weird operation. I run Margaret's paperwork through every fraud detection trick I know: color mismatches, forged signatures, even watermarks that, Carol informs me, are FBI training samples. My heart sinks. How do you know that? I ask. She just says she's seen similar cases in consulting. That's when it hits me. I don't know what my wife really does. Deborah ramps up her friendly visits, but it's all an excuse to gather info. even eavesdrop on work calls. I test her with a fake case, and sure enough, next day she asks about details only someone listening in could know. It's systematic intelligence gathering, not neighborly interest. Soon after, anonymous calls start going to my clients, spreading rumors about my ethics, leading to canceled contracts and real threats to my business. Then, a twist, Patricia, a neighbor 3 houses down, confides in me. She's caught in a custody battle and admits Margaret told her non-compliance with the HOA could look bad in court. Margaret and Deborah were targeting single parents, elderly residents, anyone vulnerable. Patricia had been pushed to spy on us, and she hated it. That's when the bullying spreads to Emma. Kids at school saying her mom works for the FBI, that we're spies. And the look in my daughter's eyes when she asks if it's true. God, I didn't know what to say, because I was starting to wonder myself. The whole thing blows up when someone films Margaret screaming at Carol to join the HOA, and it goes viral. Strangers online have details about our lives nobody should know. Car plates, work schedules, even building names. Downtown, the privacy breach is staggering. That night, when I demand the truth from Carol, she finally cracks. She pulls out a badge, Special Agent Carol Harris, FBI Financial Crimes Division. Undercover for 18 months. The relief, the fear, mixes together in a way I can't describe. Turns out, Deborah's surveillance wasn't amateur, it was part of an organized criminal operation. And Margaret was just a pawn, recruited through psychological manipulation and promises of saving her house from foreclosure. But the biggest shock is still coming. Patricia finds a manila folder full of surveillance photos and federal personnel data in Deborah's house. Deborah wasn't just running scams. She had files on dozens of families, with confidential data that could only come from inside government systems. It's professional, terrifying, and way bigger than any HOA scam. We go public, cooperating with the feds, gathering evidence, exposing how Deborah used her sweet grandma act to run a multi-state intelligence operation, community volunteer, charity organizer, all just cover for fraud, intimidation, and manipulation on an industrial scale. The morning of the bust, Deborah tries one last desperate play, flashes a fake federal badge, and claims the sheriff is interfering with an ongoing investigation. But Carol and the sheriff see through it, ask for real orders, real credentials. Deborah's confidence cracks. The relief in the crowd when Sheriff Morgan declares the HOA's documents forgeries and Carol presents her real badge. Man, you could feel the whole neighborhood breathe again. Deborah's arrested, her criminal network exposed. Margaret's breakdown is both heartbreaking and a warning about how people get recruited into crime out of desperation. Carol's undercover work helps put an end to a 5-state fraud operation, and our family finally starts to heal. Emma regains her confidence. Our neighborhood rebuilds real trust. And we help create new laws and protocols to keep communities safe from this kind of exploitation. You look back and realize, sometimes the only way to save yourself and your neighbors is to question authority, demand real answers, and never back down when you know something's off. So here's my question for you. What would you do if you discovered your community was being run by a criminal mastermind in disguise? Ever dealt with a fake authority, a bullying HOA, or a neighbor who just knew way too much? Drop your stories in the comments. Let's talk about what real justice looks like and how you'd handle it if trouble knocked on your door.